T would say, if I asked it to talk to me about finding an agent, you know, every writer I've ever known well has to grapple with this question. When do I find an agent? What kind of agent? What if I can't get an agent? What if I sign with an agent and I don't like that agent? And so I think it takes a lot of heart to talk about this question, but I wondered what ChatGPT would say. Um, I've started with how hard is it to find an agent? And ChatGPT said it can be very hard. And then I said, ChatGPT, should one give up? And what do you think ChatGPT said?
No.
Of course, said persevere.
Right.
Persevere.
ChatGPT isn't stupid.
No,
I mean,
that evidently
not
no.
original.
No, but not specific. However, persevere. And then, you know, I wondered how hard do you think it is right now in time
Yeah.
to start? Let's start with a hard question. How hard is it to find an agent? And what is it, what does it take? What does it take to get read by Alice Tasman?
I think it takes tenacity. I think it takes resilience. I think it takes due diligence in researching what agents are specializing in. If you're writing fantasy or romance or thrillers or sci-fi, you need to do your due diligence and look at what agents are buying or representing those kinds of books. If you're writing literary, short story, again, there's so much available online, and I feel like that is the numero uno thing to do. Research who you are going to be querying. And then I think also query wide. Once you know your players involved, get that query down. Do you know what a query is? We can talk about this, Betsy. But then you fire it out to multiple agents. And
Mm-hmm.
I will say that agents, like everyone else, we're all overwhelmed and our inboxes are always full. So there is truth in networking. If you know someone who can refer you, it doesn't matter. If you don't, that's okay too. What
Mm-hmm.
it requires though is a query letter that you knock out of the park, which means it's concise, it's articulate, but it's also descriptive, and it's got a very strong pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's no more than 3 paragraphs, truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard, and it is something that requires like a long view. You
Yeah.
have to be able to run the marathon. I think throughout publishing, you need to run the marathon. As an agent, I feel like I run the marathon every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's filled with a lot of rejection, but at the end of the day, it's one yes. One
Yeah.
yes for an agent, one yes for an editor, you know. Um,
Right.
I mean, I can keep talking.
I
I
love the
think
energy.
that,
I think your energy is so uplifting. And I think, that's one more thing that we don't get from Chat GPT, not to beat a dead horse, but like just, that sort of like emotional
right.
tone from an agent like you is really, really invaluable.
So you guys are not writing because someone's saying you have to write a novel or you have to write, if you're writing nonfiction, you have to write a collection of essays. No one's telling you to do this. You're doing it because you can't not do it, because it's in you. You can't not do it. And I kind of feel like as an agent, I'm agenting for the same reason,
Mm-hmm.
because I love reading. I love working with writers. When something hits, it hits hard. And Betsy can attest to this. It's believing in your writer and the work that's in front of you or the work that's to come. Because books make the world a better place. And it's just so, I mean, that sounds so silly, but it's like, the upside of it is that you're doing it because you can't not.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're going, I mean, I'm sure you've already experienced rejection and that's part of it, but when you get the yes, I want your short story, or yes, I will sign you, it is just like such a beautiful affirmation, and it's the next step. Everything is chipping away. There's no final, yay, we've made it through the goal. Like it's
Right.
chipping, 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 chipping. It's journey.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I wonder, I will turn it over to the folks after this question, but Chat GPT, to bring up the idea of rapport and communication, like you want to have this link, you want to have this easy dialogue with the person that you sign with. And I think that probably the agent wants that with the writer. How
Right.
important is that? How important is the element of personality when you hop on the phone?
So I think that so an agent, so we're like the liaison between our writer and a publisher.
Mhm.
We're your manager, we're your like mediator, we're your advocate. And that can only work when there's trust. Trust is the key element. And it's like I can read something and think, wow, this is so much potential. But I think I need to have a conversation with the writer first to make sure the visions align, and then request a revision, before I sign. Because I do feel like visions need to align and expectations need to be expressed right up front, or just managed. It's like full transparency, and that's where trust comes in.
Right.
The more honest, there's nothing, but it is a give and take. And I understand that with when you're writing a novel, or you're writing a collection of essays, or you're writing a memoir, this is something you've been laboring over for X number of months or years even. And you sign with an agent, and then the agent really is the advocate for that. And there is a point of having to let go and trust that agent. And the thing about publishing, I'm probably telling more than you need to know from this question, but the thing about publishing is that it's a crapshoot, and you guys might know this. There are no guarantees. So while we can say, yeah, if you sell a celebrity memoir or a sports book, there's a certain kind of like framework where you can figure out X number of books that will sell and what you will make. For a debut writer, there's no precedent. There is no market. So it's almost like your agent, your fabulous writing, your editor are creating the market for the book. And that all is just, it's live. That's all live and energy. And maybe it's part of a cultural moment and timing. That's what makes publishing so thrilling, though, is that, when it works, it works. And it's really, at point of origin, it's about the writing. And then it's about the agenting, and then it's about the editing, and then it's about the publisher, and then it's about the publicity, and then it's about timing and reviews, but not even reviews anymore. So there's so many unknown variables, that the engine starts with you guys, and then it ripples off on your agent, on your editor, et cetera, et cetera.
No, I think
I
that
strayed way from your question, but
no, it's great. Are you kidding? No, you didn't. I mean, it's wonderful information. It's all connected. And I just turned my camera off because I was crashing for a second. So if I do that, it just means I'm trying to stabilize the internet. But I think this might be a good time to open the floor to questions. And I haven't looked in the chat, but you can put them in the chat or you can ask them.
I'll ask a question. Hi, my name's Joan.
Hi, Joan.
Hello. This is a really exciting conversation. Thank you for being here. So my question was, at what point should you look for an agent? Should you have a piece of work that you have spent all your time getting to be super perfect, or should you try to, or is it just going to be edited by your agent, or so that's my first question. And then do you need to have an agent to be successful?
Number one is you query agents when you feel you have done as much as you can do for your work, that it is as polished perfect as it can possibly be in your purview, like in your iteration, in your relationship to it. There is no more you can do. That is when you query an agent. And you're right, because even though you think it's polished perfect, I bet you that the agent will say, well, I think you need to do this, this, and this, and then we'll go out with it. And it's usually not giant, but there are notes usually that you will get from an agent, and then you'll go out to an editor, because my job as an agent is to make sure editors are overworked, and it's so easy to say no. It's so easy to put down a manuscript. So if by page 10 they're not fully in, they're going to put it down. Do you know? So my job is to make sure the work you've done is lifted to its best level. So it's almost like you take it to your, I think that a lot of debut writers make the mistake of querying before they're ready to submit a work that's as polished perfect as it can be. And that doesn't mean being in a writer's group or an MFA program or whatever. It just means, if you're writing alone and you've been working on something, taking time away from it, like a month or two away, and then revisiting it and reading it, not on a computer printed out. Do you know? So you have a little bit of like objectivity. And there's no sort of like, I have to get this done in 2 months. I have to get this done in 6 months. It's so important for the work to be where it needs to be, because really you have one opportunity when you're querying. And that's my key thing. Okay. And then to your point, question 2, yes, I think it's really important to have an agent. Unless you want to self-publish. But agents are the gatekeepers that will get you to, traditional publishers and indie publishers that are doing beautiful books.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Of course, we're talking about prose. We're talking about fiction and creative nonfiction, right, Alice?
Yes.
I mean, poetry is its own beautiful
Totally different
animal, and usually poets don't have agents, but sometimes they do.
Thank
And
you for
yes, I mean, just since there are, of course, there are poets here, but yes, I totally agree. I mean, an agent makes everything so much more fluid for a prose writer. Let me look at the chat because I see that
so
Dahlia.
for poets who are out there, it's a really exciting time for poetry.
Yes.
So it's never been better. In the 25 plus years that I've been doing this, poetry is really having a moment. So this is really in a mainstream way.
Right.
And so that's very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Okay, so Dahlia is, I think, asking about the percentage that an agent gets from when a client's book sells.
15.
15, right. And then Leslie, what kind of social media platform should a writer have before you sign them? Interesting.
So I think more and more publishers are relying on writers to do whatever they can for publicity, and that means social media, Instagram, Facebook, X, Blue Sky, whatever you can. It's stressful for writers, and it can, publishers are now having teams that help writers manage it and coach them. When it's natural, it's great. If it's, I don't love social media. I'm doing it because I have to. And that's just kind of the world we live in right now. So, it counts. Whether these platforms actually move books, who's to say? But it's almost like it's our responsibility to just bring visibility to work in every way we can. And that does fall on the writer.
I do love social media, Alice.
I know you do.
And
you have cute boys, so you can post.
I think of it as a big family photo album, but that's for our Zoom next spring. Okay, so then Angie says, hi, how has the book talk boom changed, impacted the way you and your clients find each other?
Okay, well, so Angie, this is a great question. I'm still figuring this out because book talk is really genre-y in my point of view. It's romance, it's rom-com, it's fantasy, it's romantasy. So I don't do a lot of that, but I'm actually I'm really interested in that corner of TikTok and the chatter and the viral aspect of it. And I recently signed a very young writer who wrote a romantasy. And this is new for me. So I am playing catch up. I do feel like publishers are bending over backwards to figure out how to like rein in TikTok and make it work for them. But guess what? You probably know this. You guys, many of you probably know this, is that there's no rhyme or reason as to why something goes viral. So they haven't figured it out yet, but they are on it and they are, they're sending book talkers their books and galleys when it makes sense. And those are for genre titles, not so much for literary fiction and short stories, and probably not memoirs as much, but more like the
The genre first.
genre. Yeah.
Well, and I want to get back to the chat because these are great questions, but let me insert one question about genre, Alice, because I think one thing I've sensed about you is that you will sometimes accept genre work if it is also literary, in that it's so idiosyncratic. It's doing something new,
It is. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like
There is truth
um,
in that.
the
Yes.
wonderful novel Dietland, I think, is like a little bit speculative, right?
Revenge fantasy.
Yeah. Okay.
But I didn't even know that term when I signed it.
Okay.
I didn't even know that term. People were throwing that term around and I was like, what?
Mhm.
Fantasy it is. What?
Right. So you're just going with instinct here? Is that
Yes.
okay? So if you love it, you read it. Is that fair?
Yes. I will also
Like
say,
if you love the sample, you read it. Okay.
I'm trying to think of how I got this right. I mean, smart agents see what's working.
Mhm.
And so I think that I was kind of intrigued in terms of my romantasy, because that's really out of my bandwidth. But
Mhm.
I was intrigued by the whole genre. And I signed her not for the romantasy, but I ended up going out with the romantasy. She had written a middle grade. I have a couple of kids writers. She's a really good writer and
Yeah.
a really strong world builder.
Mhm.
And she knows her genre so well that what she wrote convinced me. So I'm kind of tying, as I do with all my writers, is tying my wagon to their star. But in a way, this feels like very exciting to me because it's different. And at the end of the day, for me, it's about the writing.
Mhm. Mhm. Let me ask Ben Coleman's question. What specific qualities of writing are agents looking for that grab you immediately other than polished form? A certain tone or voice? And maybe,
Voice.
I mean, I know
Who was
you,
that? That was Ben.
Ben. Yes.
Ben. So Ben, I don't see on my screen right now, but so for me, voice is numero uno and character. And yeah, if I love a voice, I am in. And I tend to be attracted to voices that are subversive and slightly left of center and unpredictable and dark, which is hard actually right now in terms of selling because people are wanting to escape to things
Mhm.
that are, light and entertaining. I mean, my stuff is entertaining, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, it's definitely voice, 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 voice.
Right. Right. And I think that when we met,
It was voice.
those years ago, that's why I liked you, because you valued voice so much and you talked about other things you'd read that you considered really voice driven, and that's my jam. And so, we had such a good connection right away in terms of taste.
Right.
And I could tell that you weren't about sales first. You were really about loving writing and loving the story first.
I do feel like because it's gotten harder or it feels like I know that rejection is part of it. So I'm already so prepared for that, but I have in the past made the mistake of taking on a writer because of the conditional verb. I should do this. I should because he or she is a referral. I should because if I don't, then XYZ is going to represent them and sell it for me. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
that is always a freaking mistake.
Okay.
Always a mistake. So now I'm saying this so you all can hold me to it because I really, it's about the writing. And yeah, the quality of the work.
Mm-hmm. And the
It's not
experience.
about, I need to do this because it's a trend. Although I did say I was interested in romance scene, but it's really well written.
Well, but it seems like you found your
Right. I get a ton of
in because the story, showed up and you liked that.
Yes.
You liked the writing. So, I don't think you're contradicting that the writing is first. Okay, let me ask another question. Please tell
Hey,
us.
Betsy, can I ask a question?
Oh,
Sorry,
hey, Stephen, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
sorry to jump the
No,
queue
please do.
a
Please.
bit. Um, Alice, this came up a little bit, and hi, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. Could you talk a little bit about, I have two questions. One, if one of the things that the agent is bringing to the table is their relationship with editors, how can a writer evaluate what kind of relationships the agent has? That would be obscure often to the writer. So that's my first question. And it came up a little bit in the story that you shared. How important is it in a contemporary context for the writer to be thinking about multiple projects, about saying, I have this novel and I'm working on a memoir. I have this in terms of selling themselves to an agent?
So the first question is, all right, let me just break it. I'm going to rewind a teeny bit. So as a gatekeeper for you guys, as your advocate, as your manager, as your liaison to a publishing house, I have to know the 5 big traditional houses have multiple imprints at each house. I have to know which editor at each imprint would be the best editor to go to for your work. You could find out who I've done business with. It's not truly representative because we don't always report deals when they happen. We sit on them, but there is a site called Publishers Marketplace. It's subscription based, costs money. It's for people who are agents, editors who are in the business, but it reflects the deals that an agent has done. As I said, it's not truly representative because a lot of agents and editors choose to sit on their deals until the manuscript is ready for sharing so that we can get sub-rights deals. Anyway, but there's a lot online. So I feel like as a writer, you can Google whomever you're interested in and see who they've worked with, or if they've been interviewed, or if they've been spotlighted in a place, or go to their website, their agency website, see the books that are on their site, so you have an idea. But it truly is the agent's job to know what editor to go to. And then wait, what was the second part of the question?
How important is it about having multiple projects to pitch multiple books?
So that actually can be, this might sound weird, but if you're querying an agent for the first time and you're querying your novel, but you also have a memoir and you're thinking about writing a short story, that can be a deterrent. It's really, for kids writers to go out with multiple projects, that's easier. As an adult writer who is potentially a debut writer, you're really going to focus on one project, unless, and even if it's like a series, even if it's something that genre that is introducing a second book, that's kind of at the tail end of my pitch to my editor. It's really like you can have a conversation with your agent. Like, this is what I'm thinking Longview in our agency, at our agency. We sign someone, it's not per project, it's for the long view. So that would be a conversation you'd have with your agent. Like, this is the project I'm ready to go out with now. And obviously it would be the one that the agent read. But you can also say, like, I'm thinking about doing this X, Y, and Z. And that agent will probably say to you, let's table those until we place this.
Okay, great. Let me throw another question at you. So Chris Hart says, please tell us something not obvious about the connections between literary magazines, agents, and publishing. Meaning, does success in getting published by lit mags mean that my chances are better in signing with an agent? You mentioned gatekeepers. Does that include lit mags, contests, etc.?
I'm not going to really answer this probably right, but I feel like if you can get your work published in literary mag, if you're a literary writer and you're getting short stories published along the way, that's going to totally help. That helps any query letter. If your bio says you've been published in X, Y, and Z, and these are distinguished literary magazines, that's going to help. But what it really comes down to, the green light for me, is the work that you submit. So that might get you the ticket to please send in the first 3 chapters or the manuscript. I'm really interested because I see that you've already been published. That's probably not that unoriginal. So I didn't really answer your question. But it's all connected. And I do feel like publishing, there is no straight line. There is no straight line. So maybe that's my whatever.
I like that. No, Alice, I think that's so great. And I think that you really are kind of the Zen master of talking about sending stuff out. And you often have a very surprising viewpoint. Like when I've published a few stories or I hit the magazine I really wanted, I get that story in, and we talk about, when we did send out one novel and you were like, I don't know that I don't know that we need to mention this in the pitch because these editors are swamped and they're looking, they want to focus on that one thing, right? They want the eyes on the prize. So it's kind of like when, you said to Stephen, maybe, we just lead with this one project for now. And that's really what matters. But I agree and definitely have the sense that publishing in lit mags, and I love lit mags more than social media even, right? But that it helps you get an agent. I do think that's true. I think that helped our early conversation and having
agents are looking at lit mags.
yes,
and,
right.
we are talking though about a corner of fiction, like if you're talking literary fiction. So it's the same animal. It doesn't matter. Like if you're writing a novel and you've had short stories published, that's all in the same, you're in the same lane. Obviously, if you're trying to sell a short story collection, try and get some of those stories out there before you query an agent. 100%.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of story collections, because our students who are writing fiction are writing a lot of stories. Can you talk a little bit about what I see as a trend that comes and goes? Like right now, I'm seeing more story collections. Curtis Sittenfeld has a story collection, but of course she already had a bunch of novel.
She's an aberration. Yeah.
She can do what, like, are short stories going to come back? And
I hope so. I have a great short story writer named Elizabeth Crane. She's amazing. And she's been writing short story collections since the 90s.
Yeah.
But I will say that Emma Klein had a recent short story collection, I think, too. It feels like it's hard right now for short story collections. Unless there's some sort of angle or obviously if one of the short stories has been published in a big place, that can be a game changer. And if you have a novel you're writing and a short story collection,
In the
the
wings.
pipeline.
Yeah.
That's almost easier sometimes if that novel does well or sells, you know, you can kind of
Because
tuck the
you've
short
got the
story
name
collection.
recognition, right?
Yeah, you can tuck it in. But Curtis Sittenfeld is a little bit of an aberration because she is a superstar.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
She's amazing.
Why do you think that that's the case with stories? Is it that they're seen as such little art pieces, and so they, you know, even when the critics love them, they don't, the wider.
You know what? I don't get it because I love short
Mhm.
stories.
Yeah.
And I feel like we are an ADHD culture right now.
Mhm.
And I feel like we dip in and we want it out, you know, so I don't,
Yeah, it's hard to make sense of that,
it's
right?
hard. Yeah. You know, houses like Scribner or FSG or like any of them really, Harper, they would do like one short story collection a season, or even, I wouldn't say a year, but like, you know, it's like one short story collection.
Mhm.
And it
Mhm.
could be like that Curtis Sittenfeld, not necessarily a debut short story collection.
Yeah. When you read short stories, or you know that someone's published a lot of short stories and they've given you a novel draft that's working, do you feel like, yes, we already talked about, like, of course the novel is the thing that's going out, but do you have more confidence in their ability to become inspired and generate longer narratives because they've learned the craft of short story writing?
Yeah, I mean, if I've read a part of an, yes, I think I'm if I've signed someone for a novel and there's a short story collection as a part of that submission or that writer's work, I'm sure I would have great faith in the short story collection, but I would prioritize the novel for submission. If that
But
answers your question.
yes, but do you think that if a person writes strong stories that you like, this is a very convoluted question, does that give you more confidence that they're going to be able to
Do
write
long
novels,
prose?
come up with novel ideas, and so forth?
I'm not sure because I will say that I represent Elizabeth Crane.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote, I think, 4 story collections before she wrote a novel. And
Mm-hmm.
she was convinced she would never write a novel. But her stories got longer and longer. And I was like, Betsy, I think you can write a novel. So
Mm-hmm.
she did, but there was no guarantees. And now, since she's written a memoir, and now she's back to short stories. But I don't think short story writers necessarily translate to novelists. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Many, I bet it would be an interesting question to ask ChatGPT.
I'll do that tomorrow. I'll let you know. I'll call
I'm
you.
curious.
Yeah, I know exactly. So I have so much that I want to ask you first, though. So let me see from the chat. Albert Phillips, how can creative nonfiction writers stand out as they seek an agent? And this is something I wanted to ask you too. Like, I've understood that both novelists and memoirists need to have that entire manuscript ready to go. I mean, it used to be that you could have a little bit of a memoir, right? But now you probably have to have the whole cloth thing. So 2 questions. How can creative nonfiction writers stand out? And you need the whole cloth book, right? Go ahead.
I mean, I think you stand out through your work and
Mm,
voice
your
and
voice.
story. Yeah. And I think that I do feel like a full manuscript is smarter to go out with. But if you have 3 or 4 standalone creative essays that are a couple have been placed somewhere, or they're just so, you know, they hold together thematically, then maybe you are ready to go out. Voice is what makes, I think, any writer stand out and distinctive.
And Alice, when you say go out, you mean try to get an agent,
Try to
right?
get an
Yeah,
agent.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But now listen, here just to add one more layer. So I've heard a rumor recently that this woman, I don't know, she's a friend of a friend, but she's like sold some novels with just a treatment. And I know people did that in the 80s sometimes, but does that happen very often?
I'm sure well, not very often. And I honestly feel like if that happens, That person maybe is 12, graduating from an MFA program in Iowa and has I mean, it happens because of some sort of crazy stars aligning.
Yeah.
And maybe that person is a friend of someone hugely successful who is kind of like given the entree, not to take away from the treatment,
Yeah.
but it's just not a normal path
Right. Right.
at all.
Yeah.
So, and that may, that's, yeah, it's a shortcut,
Mm-hmm.
aberration. It's not.
Right. 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 Okay. Okay. So Judd says, hello, what is your niche if you have one or many? Your niche.
I literary commercial mainstream fiction.
Would you say upmarket women?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I say literary commercial, that kind of is upmarket fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Upmarket. Right. And so I've also heard just from like the same friend of a friend that it's women buying the novels right now,
Yes.
and so
Traditionally,
upmarket.
that's been what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
So upmarket women's, like how do we define upmarket women's fiction and in 2025? And do we still say upmarket women's fiction? Because that sounds really dorky, but it's like in my head as a thing I've heard over.
Does sound dorky.
I know.
So writers like, and I'm going to go into different genres, but like Tana French
Yeah.
writes literary suspense.
Yeah.
She's upmarket fiction, I
Yeah.
think. I would love to sign a Tana French.
Yeah.
And that's
We're not going to
suspense.
say women's because we all know that women are the only ones reading the books.
Right, but that's suspense. So it's like, but then if you think about Patricia Cornwell, well,
Yeah.
like much more plotted.
Yeah. Mary Clark.
Yeah. So there's a difference there.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm trying to think
like what you're doing.
Kate Atkinson
Mhm.
would be like sweet spot.
Yeah.
Who else? Oh, Curtis Sittenfeld.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet spot. But then she's also comedy. She's romance. But
Yeah.
she's like, it's really smart writing.
Okay.
And it's not, it doesn't prioritize plot over character and voice. I think these writers don't prioritize genre over, voice, story, and character. And, even Saray Walker, who was Dietland, she wrote, that was her first novel. And I mean, she sees herself as a literary writer, but she's commercial, like there's a commerciability to it. So
she's tapping into the zeitgeist, right? She's talking about political and cultural issues.
Like a wider audience.
And that thus we have upmarket.
Right.
Okay. I like it. Can I ask for myself just one question? Because, I love comedy and I like writing that is dark, but also makes you laugh a little bit. And I know that, we're living in a difficult moment for reasons that we don't have time to go into. But one NPR story was talking about how, maybe comedy's over for the moment because we're all needing to focus on the terror at hand. I was like, wait, we need comedy more than ever. So what does a good agent say about that? Can you please soothe my soul and tell me it's still okay to be funny?
I think people want comedy. I think that people really want that more than, that's what I'm seeing in my submissions. Because I like dark, I like subversive, and I'm coming up against it because people are like, no, I just need to escape. I just need something light. But that doesn't mean predictable light. That means, for the people I'm going to, for the editors I'm going to, it doesn't mean like rom-com necessarily. If it's a rom-com, it's going to be smart, funny.
Yeah.
Curtis Sittenfeld.
Right. Let's see. Okay. There's so many. Let me try to let's do like a speed dating where we ask a few questions because there are some chats I haven't gotten to. So let's see. Here, Sarah says, are ghostwriters represented by agents too? Who generally connects a ghostwriter to an author? I know there are some agencies who do that, Alice.
There are some agencies. I don't know. They definitely are represented by agents, and that those agents specialize in ghostwriters. So they know how to, it's almost like book packaging. So it's a different kind of agenting. It's work for hire, and sometimes it's one payment off the advance versus getting royalties after a book has been published. So it's a different model, but there are definitely agencies who represent ghostwriters, and you could Google that.
And Sarah, if you want to email me at bboyd@ubalt.edu, and anyone who wants to do that, I'm going to put that in the chat. bboyd@ubalt. I'll tell you about my experience looking at the option of ghostwriting, but also if anyone wants to learn more about the MFA, I'm happy to discuss. Okay, let's see.
Let me just say, Gotham
Mary.
Gotham Ghostwriters is an organization that's gotten a lot of people we know and friends started as ghostwriters.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So you could always look that up and email them. And they love people with, certain areas of expertise, graduate degrees and this or that. Like if, and you write well, then you might get pulled into a project. Let's see. James, how much are you involved with the book cover design? I bet not much at all. Alice.
Oh my God, James, that's so great. I bet not much at all. You're kind
But
of,
I could be wrong.
well, no. Oh, that was you. That was your little ad.
No, I said I bet not much.
Oh, I thought that was
Yeah,
James.
I'm
I
wrong.
thought that
Maybe
was
no,
very...
I had to I had to editorialize.
So
You tell me.
unless you're like Stephen King, in the contract, we cannot get in our clause approval on jacket design. Like the author never has approval. They have consult. And honestly, like a publisher and an editor really does want to make their writer happy. So if we get a jacket, if I get a jacket and I'm like, oh my God, I keep my mouth sealed until my writer looks at it. And if they love it, like, that's great. If usually there's a conversation, it's rare that you get a jacket that you're just like, oh my God, this is horrible. But but when that happens, it's my job to go back to the publisher and say, can we get some more ideas? And I won't do that unless the writer and I, and even my team at the agency, has discussed direction to go in. I don't just go back and say, we want to see something else. We go back and say, look, this is what we were thinking. It just feels what you've shown us is way different than what we had anticipated. Can we maybe go in this direction? So leading them a little, just one or two samples. And if they come back and say no, then we talk about maybe the palette or the layout or the font. There are a lot of different ways to talk about jacket design so that it's not just yes and no. But at the end of the day, it's really the publisher. And frankly, the editor's listening to publicity and sales. The publicity and sales are saying, no, this is the one, we need this because we're going to reach this audience. That can sometimes be the thing. And a writer has to just roll with it.
So I know Gary wanted to insert a question. Let me ask one more. So David, what percentage of the authors that you represent do you get deals for? He asked. That's like a 60 minutes question. That's really that's hard hitting. Do you have your calculator, Alice, to
No, but I'm glad that I haven't signed a ton of new writers right now because I'm doing fine.
You are, I know.
I'm doing fine. I think that because I've been doing this for a long time, I don't have the heat of having to sign new writers constantly. I can be a little selective and if I have things on submission that I really want to sell before I take on someone new, I'll do that. And the majority of my writers are repeaters. So I've already sold their work. And I will say that in 2025, I made a pact with myself and I was like, you are going to just go hard and look hard for debut writers because it's feeling like, let's shake it up. So I
Mhm.
do, I have 3 debut writers and I am hustling. You know, it's not easy and they're really different.
Mhm.
But the percent, I mean, 90% of the people I represent, I've sold.
Mhm.
Or yeah. It's really the debut writers who I'm hustling right now.
This is
But as a
a
younger
literary
agent,
agent who I'm going to send a query to.
sorry, I interrupted you. I didn't get the beginning of that.
Go ahead, sir. Sir.
What I was just going to say, and then whomever wants to, as a younger agent, an agent coming up, their lists are definitely weighted heavilier.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
weighted more in terms of taking risks, and they probably haven't, you know, their list might be 50-50 or 30-70.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
also, you know, agenting is like you eat what you kill. Like it's like we can, you know, we if we don't sell something, we don't see the money on the other side. You know, it's like incentivizing because you have to hustle. And I will say that most agents are doing multiple things in an agency, not just representing a writer's work.
Mhm.
They're doing subrights, they're doing permissions, they're doing royalties, they're doing contracts. So they're doing a lot of other things as well.
Yes. I think we could unmute folks so that I think this person was speaking maybe and then he was muted. So maybe Gary, if you don't mind unmuting, and Gary, you ask your question.
I'll unmute myself to ask my question.
And then I think you could unmute, you know, anyone who raises their hand or everyone.
Can I unmute everyone? I guess so.
Or other, if you want to ask a question, unmute yourself if you have Gary's permission, because we just have about 5 more minutes. So
I don't have a like blanket
okay, that's fine.
unmute on
You ask
everybody or
you ask
anything.
your question.
I believe people can just unmute themselves.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I feel like most folks unmuted themselves from the jump or muted themselves from the beginning. I didn't do it to everybody. Anyway.
Got it. Okay.
Sorry, I'm all over the place. I do have a question, or actually a two-parter that relates to 2 previous questions, one from a while ago, one from more recently. I wrote it down to keep myself on track because, as you can probably already tell, I'll just go off into no man's land. So there was a previous question that asked from Stephen, or part of his question was essentially, is it better to go into a pitch with multiple projects? So related to that, is it in genre, would agents be more interested in like one-off stories, or would they be more interested in a pitch for a series of stories? And in that scenario, is it better to have more or less detail about the following volumes of a series? And then the second part of the question, I'm sorry, but relates to, say you're in that position, but you don't have a good social, or your social media game's kind of lacking. Is it better at that point to put all that on ice while you then go ahead and build yourself up in popularity online?
Okay. So I think if I'm understanding the first part of the question, an agent isn't going to sign you on one story or one essay or,
I mean, novels.
okay.
Are you talking about like a series of genre
Right. Like
novels?
if I
Maybe?
had book 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Okay.
So in your query to your agent, if you have a series, you've finished the first novel, second novel is fully fleshed out, you've got the synopsis, you've got a full-on proposal for second and third novel, 100% include to the agent. And the agent will then decide how much of that they're going to put into their pitch, whether they're going to just like front load their pitch with the finished novel and this has potential for a series, which I have, of which I have like a partial in the second book. You know what I mean? It's like you don't want to overload the editor, but it really depends on how fully fleshed out that second and third novel are, if they're part of a series. And I'm guessing that, or I would be shocked if you're talking about one writer who's writing in different genres with multiple series. That seems like explosive. Yeah.
No, I
So,
would think like one story that goes over several books.
right. Okay. So that would be something that you would include in your pitch. But in order to get the agent, you have to have like that first finished novel polished. And it doesn't necessarily help you to have a sequel written, but neither one is fully polished. Do you know? It's like put all your money on the first one. And then if the second one is more of just a synopsis and or proposal or partial, that's fine. The agent will decide how much she or he is going to present to the editor. The second part of the question was really, what was the question again? Quickly, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Big related to the question earlier
Oh,
about
social media. I got it. Don't even freaking waste your time. You focus on the writing. Don't worry about social media now. It's like, you know, if you have 100 followers, it doesn't matter. Social media is something that we will talk about once you are working with an agent. If it happens, if you're already on it and it's organic to your person and you're already doing it, great. If not, don't put everything aside and try to fire it up in 6 months, because that won't happen.
Thanks.
Okay.
That's exactly what I needed to hear. And thanks, Stephen, because that's what you told me. And
Love that answer. So one last question. What does the pitch to publishers look like? Ask Catherine. What is it important for for the publisher to hear about the client?
I mean, it's very much connected to your query. Like, you know, that lead in needs to be succinct, articulate, concise, but also really descriptive. And if there's a great comp you have, awesome. And then it's like a paragraph. I don't want to say synopsis because synopsis are so boring, but it's tell me about the book. Tell me about what you've written. Tell me about why I should read it. Maybe you know something about the market and why it's relevant to the market. And then your bio is anything if you've been published, you'd include that. If not, that's fine too. But you know, for an agent working with editors, we have relationships with editors. So if I send something to an editor, I know they're going to respond because they know me, they trust me, and that's why you have an agent. And I think a lot of this used to be done on phone and at lunch, and so a lot of that comes through actual enthusiasm they hear at a conversation. You've got to read this. I don't even have to tell them about what it's about. It's like, no, this has me dazed and dazzled. You need to read it. So they hear that, and that's why they want to read it. And I still do make those calls and or send those emails just like that. Best thing I read in a year. And then I go into, here's my pitch. So that's what it is.
That's great. Excellent. Well, it looks like we're out of time. I'm just going to table my really final question, which is something you can just answer by email, Alice. Am I your favorite client ever? But just let's talk about that like before the weekend, before
Okay.
Easter weekend. And thank you. You are so sweet and real and smart. And
This was a pleasure. I could do a whole nother hour.
you.
I would just need to get wine.
Say it again.
I could do a whole nother hour. I would
Yeah.
just need to get wine.
Right, right. No, I know. Well, I mean, yeah, and we'll have you back. You know,
But here's the thing, you keep on. You got to keep writing because
Right.
it starts with you guys.
That's right.
We're
That's right.
only as good as our writers.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having me.
Thank you, Alice.
Here.
Thank you.
thanks.
Bye, Betsy. Bye, Stephen. Bye, Gary.
Bye, everyone.
We good on the recording?
Yep, we're good.
Awesome.
All right, I'm going to leave, which is going to end the recording.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Betsy. Nice job.
Stephen,
So
Oh, he
fun.
left. I was gonna say something to Steven. All right.
Thank you, Gary.
I'll
Take
see
care.
you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.